Now recording.
Hey, how's everybody doing? How's our wonderful, and I don't know that you're all educators of the small and tiny, but you're here because you're interested in the small and tiny. I don't know if that's a demeaning way of putting it. All I know is that I'm excited to hear from our panelists and in this conversation. My name is Dean Shareski, and along with my friend and colleague Alec, we're just interested in hosting conversations that kind of I think are needed and interesting, and that's how we present this. There's no agenda around this beyond just people chatting, and so this was a topic that we knew that people were interested in. My own background is I actually taught first grade for 7 years, my first 7 years. So I taught little ones, and I love little ones. I have little grandbabies that are still small, but I like this age group. It's fun, but of course, in the context of this pandemic, it's fascinating, I think, and I think a lot of people are interested in whether you are somebody who teaches little ones or just are curious, how this is actually happening. And we've got 3 people that have a pretty good sense of what that looks like, or doing some interesting things, and so we asked them to join us to sort of chat in a very informal, casual way. But you're in a Zoom meeting here that's perhaps a little different than maybe some of the Zoom meetings you participated. It's a webinar format. So I'm going to pass it over to Alec just to give you a little bit of instruction as to how to navigate and
Sure.
utilize the tools.
Thanks, Dean. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all here. It's pretty easy to work in this environment, I would say. There's 3 main buttons. You have at the bottom, you should see a chat button, which a lot of you have found already, so that you can certainly participate in the chat, and we can all see what you have to say there. So feel free to chat throughout, and we'll pay attention to that and try to answer anything in there. There's also a Q&A button. So if you have a specific question that you'd like the panelists to address, or you'd like one of us to address, feel free to add your question there. You can also upload or upvote questions if you want. And there's also a raise hand button. And so if you'd like to be heard, feel free to raise your hand, and we can actually add your audio to this as well if you have something to say. It won't bring you up with video, but it'll bring you up with audio, and you can add your voice to the conversation. So it's pretty simple. I hope you can see those at the bottom of your screen, at the bottom of the Zoom window. And that's about it. I think I'll pass it back to Dean, and I hope we have a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Alec. So we have again with us, when we sort of looked at saying, we knew we wanted to talk this topic, and so where do you find your guests from? And there's, oodles and oodles of wonderful teachers of our early childhood kids, and so we could have picked a lot, but we decided, I started with my friend Aviva, who's teaches in Hamilton Wentworth School District in Hamilton, Ontario, and she teaches, and what I love about Aviva is she has a wonderful Instagram account where she really is thoughtfully sharing, so and I'll let her introduce herself in a minute. And then we have Heidi, who has been kind of the lead around Kinder Chat, which is one of the longest running educational chats that's out there. They're a strong and mighty group. And I've learned over the years, you don't mess with the Kinder Chat people. They mean business out there. And then Jennifer is this wonderful person that we found, that Alec kind of came across because of her brilliant YouTube videos. And so she does some really, really great stuff around physical education and keeping kids active and that. And she's I think from Sudbury. Is that right, Jennifer? Yeah. And by the way, Heidi is from New Hope, Pennsylvania. So why don't we start with the first question, and as I do, the ladies can give themselves a little bit more of an introduction if I missed, because I haven't said nearly enough about them. But I think one of the things I want to start with, and I'll maybe start with Heidi, is what was the mandate for you as far as like what are you supposed to be doing with your students at this time?
So we just started with a general schedule, and we started very slow, just to get everyone on board, which took 3 weeks. It really did take 3 weeks. So we started with a main meeting and then slowly built from there. There wasn't a mandate necessarily. It was really, okay, you know, how are we going to even approach this? And let's think about the schedule, and really let that kind of run. And then each teacher really just continued her regular curriculum that we were doing. But there was about a 3-week period of adjustment that took us to do that. So I know many schools haven't, you know, they had to even get computers to the kids, which some are still in process of doing. So that is a bit of a tangle, but the mandate was really about creating a schedule that was workable and doable without too much screen time. That was a huge consideration, that the children aren't on, you know, let's stick them on the video from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. is not developmentally appropriate. So we have 2 short meeting times, and then we slowly have extended it now to, I think they have, it depends, 4. That could be the max per day, but they're each a half hour.
Jennifer, what about you? Because I know you have a little bit of a different teaching role too, but I'd love to hear what you're up to.
I do. So I work in an elementary school, which is a K-6. We're in sort of a more inner city school, and our first, I'm really relating to what Heidi is saying, because our first few weeks was focused on getting technology in the homes. We actually distributed iPads and some Chromebooks to families that needed them. And I think my board even went so far as to help set up internet sticks for families without internet. So while we were doing that, our expectations were just to try to get the kids on to the technology. And then do whatever we could. And our principal was wonderful. She said, we're all learning this. We, you know, we'll all figure it out together, but let's just start with baby steps. So for my role, I'm a prep teacher, but I just do phys ed. So I do phys ed for grades 1, 2, 3, and our ISP class. So I was directed to just share an activity each day. And that's when I was so concerned about young kids being in this pandemic and how shocking that already would be to them. So then I decided pretty immediately that I would start to make my own exercise videos so that they could still see us. So that just exploded. So.
Yeah, amazing. I'll put the link of some of your videos in the chat. Aviva, what about you? Is that the same story, or how is that different or the same?
I guess it's a bit of both. So I can totally agree with Heidi and Jennifer. Definitely took, I would say, I even tweeted yesterday, I think it's been a month. And after a month, I finally felt like we've gotten into our groove. My teaching partner and Paula and I, so we worked together in the classroom, and we decided to have a daily class meeting with some small group meetings. We don't have to have synchronous learning. That's not what's even being directed to us. It's, in fact, we provide a lot of asynchronous options, and even with our daily meetings, they're not required. We do get pretty good attendance, but we let people come and go kind of as needed. As both Heidi and Jennifer shared, in the first week, we were just looking at getting iPads out to people who maybe didn't have access. The vast majority of our students did have access to something at home, but we had to find out. And then some people got iPads. A few people in our board also got iPads that were fit with sticks so that they could actually get onto the internet if they didn't have Wi-Fi options, so similar to Jennifer too. And just like with Jennifer, while we do offer the kind of synchronous group meetings each day, both my teaching partner, Paula especially, and sometimes I will also do some videos that we'll share in kind of our weekly activities with parents so that they can see us, because before April 6th, which is when we actually got started in Ontario with our own planning, the only thing that Paula and I did is we each recorded like a 2-minute video just to say hi to our kids, and we sent that out to parents just at the end of March break. And for them, that seemed to be something that really helped ease the stress for kids. And we heard a lot of parent feedback saying that parents would have their kids watch our videos like over and over and over again just to see us. There was nothing special about it. We were both in our pajamas just saying hello, but it was just the idea that they could see us that seemed to reduce the stress. And Paula and I are really big on relationships. So we felt that we had to have that synchronous option so that we could have kids kind of calm enough to be able to do some learning at home. And you see kids who basically like their smile brightens up the room every single day that they come in, or they'll wait to the very bitter end just to say goodbye, even if they have had nothing to contribute the whole meeting time. They just want to be able to say hi at the beginning and goodbye at the end, and then they're happy with being silent and kind of having just that hum of work in the background. It's like the little tiny bit of normal in this like very abnormal reality right now. And I appreciate what Jennifer's doing, because we have our phys ed teacher who's actually agreed to come on starting tomorrow to do Fitness Fridays for us, and she's going to lead a fitness activity for our group in the homes live in our online meeting room, and she's going to do it every Friday. So it's really exciting to have that kind of connection. It's not required for us. It's literacy and math focus is what we've been told, 5 hours for kindergarten, but it's really important to kind of get those different faces in. And we've had a couple prep coverage teachers peek in on our meeting. We had our reading specialists come in, and just the idea that they could see other people they know was really big for them, I think.
So one of the things my experience is, and I think it's probably fairly true, is that parents of, younger students tend to be more involved in the kids' education, right? So they're more concerned, and especially if it's their first child, right? Like they're really worried about all this stuff. I see Jennifer Wagner posted in the chat asking about percentage of kids that are involved. So I'll ask that and tie that to a question around parents. So one of the ongoing conversations is like, how many kids are you reaching, and who is sort of like you just can't get a hold of, and then the whole parent response. So can you give us a sense of, student involvement, parent response? I know that's a lot to throw at you, but just getting a sense of like, how people are feeling in terms of that parent response and then student engagement. So any one of you can grab that and take that question.
Well, ours is, I would say it's uneven. I think it was very uneven for the first 3 weeks. We might have anywhere from half the class to we have everybody today, it's a miracle, to, we don't have, a lot of them are checked out. And we're still having tech issues 6 weeks later, or it's actually week 7, I think, for us. We're still having those connection issues. And one of the biggest problems is, well, it's a wonderful thing and a hard thing, is parents, because allowing the space to get their child to do it themselves is quite a thing. So I just sat with a dad today and we set everything up. She had been using his account, and so we had to move the child to her account 6 weeks later, which is fine. But we sat through and basically did tech troubleshooting for an hour. And, knowing now what I know, knowing then what I would know now, I probably would have sat with each parent for that full time and set everything up in a one-on-one conference ahead of time. But I didn't, you had to start at some point, and it was like, okay, we sent 3 links out and people panicked at 3 links. Now we have 45 links. But 3 links, they just couldn't even handle that. But so that's part of it, is you're really in this relationship with both the parent and the kid. You always were as a classroom teacher, but now you really are. So that's a huge change. So going through that and trying the parent to get them to allow their child to access more on their own. Seesaw is what we use. Basically, K2 uses Seesaw, preschool and through 2nd grade uses Seesaw, and then at the 3rd grade they move over to Google Classroom, which I really appreciate. I'm in 2nd grade, So we're sort of bridging both. But Seesaw is much more, it's much easier for the little kids, although they do have to scroll, which, you know, becomes a problem finding things, but you know, that's just part of the thing you have to learn. Sorry, I kind of lost the question there.
Sort of Dean, it looks like.
I just lost my mute button. No, it's
I got
fine.
like this. Ah!
Yeah, you know, just again, this notion of like connecting the parent and the involvement. So Jennifer, what's that like on your end?
Right. So we noticed pretty early on there were only, if in a class of 30, there were only about the same 4 or 5 students in each class that were consistently logging on and indicating that they had done the activities. And with the Seesaw platform that we're using for our primary grades, I've not yet discovered if there's a function where it'll tell me who has opened the activity. It's dependent on the student or the parent to comment, add a response using that feature and saying, we did this. So one thing I tried to increase not just attendance, but increase just that communication, because maybe a lot of kids were doing the activities and I just wasn't aware. I made a video announcement asking parents and students to just say a quick did it or whatever. Or because I teach phys ed, if it's a nice day and you don't want to put your kid in front of a screen and you'd rather go for a walk, just say, we're going to go for a walk instead. It's sunny outside. Just to have that communication. That didn't really help, but that's something I tried. But we are still, our homeroom teachers, our classroom teachers are still communicating with parents and trying to get a bit more participation. So that's something we're still trying to figure out with our school.
I think ours is a little bit different than a lot of other people's experiences. I'm not sure if it's the area. First of all, I think that Paul and I might be one of the few people not using Seesaw. I'm just gonna put it out there, or so it seems. I'm pretty sure that's all I've seen is Seesaw right now. So I feel like we're one of the few who aren't using it. We had a classroom blog before, and we invited parents to always share contributions of what they were doing at home with us, which started like back just before school started. And so they've been in the habit of that. So we continued with that by trying to get them, basically they would email them to us and we would post it. But because our kids are younger and because a lot of the platforms still require some parental support, and because they were accustomed to that, we went with it. We didn't change the platform, we continued, and the blog is hosted by our board. So it didn't have like privacy concerns that we were worried about. So we tried to kind of keep with that. In terms of the meetings, we've used a combination of Google Meet and of Microsoft Teams. Our board is moving to Microsoft Teams, but when we wanted to get started on the classroom meetings on April 6th, and they were just rolling it out, and we're still a Google board until the end of the year, so we are kind of bridging 2 platforms. So we tried to have options with both so that kids could become accustomed to the new platform while with the old. That said, because the meetings aren't required, but because we kind of offer the combination of that plus the sharing online, we usually have between 23 and 26 out of 28 of our kids at our meetings every day. And the other ones that we don't have, we hear from through the stuff that they're sharing with us. And so I would say every week we hear from every kid in our classroom in one way or another. And at the end of the week on Friday, Paula and I go through our attendance list, and anyone that we haven't had some kind of interaction with over the course of the week, we just send a quick email out to parents, just touching base and just making sure everything's okay. Do they need anything? To be honest, I'm not as concerned about the academic piece. It's not because I don't care about it, but because I think that kind of mental health, social stuff that's going on right now, I think we have to be cognizant of that too. So I just want to make sure everyone's okay. And if stuff isn't working for them, then we can provide it. You know, we're both really passionate about play-based learning, and we really wanted to provide an online program that supported the document that we love. And so like, nothing with us is required. It's like we give a whole bunch of provocations over the course of the week based on what kids have shared from before. And then we also give a whole bunch of prompts of questions that will support it for people, like support learning for people whose kids are doing something else. And the hope is that they could put those things together, and that some way or another we can hear about learning that's happening. Some kids share it in our meet room with us or in Teams. Some parents email it to us, and we can't record or post pictures of anything online like in Meet or in Teams. So what we ask is we try to get kids to, you know, would you get your mom or dad to maybe take a picture and you can send it to us? Or, you know, do you want to go on Flipgrid and talk about it? And we try to give them a prompt so that we can get some sharing from them. But again, we're still hearing it, we're still seeing it, and that's what we care about in that case.
So just to follow up to that one, what is the single most success story that you would share? Whether that's something that you've done that was very well received, or just like a student that or parent that did something that just sort of warmed your heart and said, that's kind of what I'm going for. So what would be that one story of success that you would share, each of you?
For me, it was definitely, go ahead, Jen.
We seem to be going in the order of Heidi, me, Aviva.
Hi.
I'm happy to break it. Yeah. For me, it definitely was, well, just recently, is that visual PDF of the classroom with the links in there. That hands down has been the best thing ever. You know, we're giving these little kids all of these links. You know, they started not knowing if you click, where's the link? Well, it's the blue thing. It's the blue words. Click that, you know. And yes, we had done stuff online. They had computer classes, but the anxiety was so high. I don't know where the link is. Well, that's a link, honey. And so so, you know, that took a long time, and to not have a visual picture of that was massive. And so to now have that created through Google Slides and have the PDF be that picture is night and day. The kids all sighed a big, huge, they said, thank you, Miss Echternacht, thank you. They were so relieved to have the visual. And I think, you know, as adults, we forget how important that visual is, especially for little kids. Pictures tell a very powerful story. So that was number one, huge success. And I would redo that. If I had to do this all over again, I would start with that and then slowly build in. And then the second thing is small groups. Meeting in the big groups is difficult, and having those small groups, you can allow for more dynamic social interaction, which, you know, that goes into what do I miss the most, and what is the most effective is that dynamic social interaction that you can have, where, because here we have to take turns. Okay, you talk, now you talk, and it's so controlled. And a little kid, you know, that they're climbing, they're touching everything, and the social dynamism is, you know, 1,000 times in 1 minute if you measure in the classroom, and here it's 1-to-1. So it's that kind of thing. So small groups and the PDF.
Right away, I knew what my answer would be. I started making some exercise videos, and a big thing we were talking about in our phys ed classes were the self-assessment on how hard you've exerted yourself. It's part of our curriculum. So in my videos at the end, I try to say, okay, put up your hand if you could feel your heart racing or your skin sweating. And then I realized that's not a really easy way for me to hear from kids, because then they would have to communicate in the as a response. But something I thought of was to get them to submit dance moves, and all of a sudden I had all this participation, and I just asked them to send me one simple move. So what I did was I collected the dance moves via Seesaw over the course of a week. And then I made a dance video where I dressed as different characters dancing. And for confidentiality, instead of writing the student's name on the screen, I got permission just to use their initials on the screen, and used some music and made sure I was dancing to a metronome, so that when I edited everything together, it all synced up. And that got a lot of responses. And then the next week, when I did the same call out for dance moves, I had even more students because they had seen the previous week's dance thing. So that was my most successful activity for sure. And I'm going to make it a weekly thing. And once dance moves get stale, then I think I'll change to, okay, send me a workout. Maybe someone will do a push-up. Maybe someone will do, lifting up something heavy. But I've got to communicate to the kids, and I should have said this from the onset. I think you'll find this funny, that I can't spin. I get so dizzy, and so many kids want me to spin, and I can't do it. So my last dance video, I have a moment where I'm rolling. One student wanted me to roll, and you can see me go, oh, but I kept it in because it's hilarious. So if you want to check that out later, you might enjoy that.
It's almost like you've gotten the TikTok culture a little bit, sharing of dance moves and that sort of thing, like what a lot of younger kids do. So it's interesting that you've almost leveraged that ethos in some of the things you've done. Aviva?
Right, I've downloaded the TikTok app, and that's as far as I've gotten, because apparently that's a thing that I should do.
Lots of dancing and sharing for sure in that app. Yeah.
I think our maybe biggest special moment, I think, has gone, first of all, with the idea of feedback. So I've always tried to give specific feedback to kids, but usually in a kindergarten classroom, there's like a million things going on at the same time. I am never just talking to one kid. I always have like 4 different kids kind of at me sharing multiple things at the same time. I would say Paula would say the same thing. And so you try to kind of give that specific piece of feedback, but that follow-up with it is sometimes harder to manage. And I've appreciated with the blog that what we've started to do is we write feedback on the blog in the comments, and the parents know to go back with their kid and they can look at the feedback there. Or if they're sharing it in our meeting room, then we share a piece of feedback with them after they've shared something. So we give them a question, something to ponder and follow up. And it's amazing to actually see kids taking the feedback, and the next step of what is shared based on that feedback. And for like the first time ever, I actually feel like we're seeing the impact of the feedback like right across the board, which is a really nice thing to be able to see. Maybe because we're actually able to focus on one child at a time for a period of time. The other thing with our virtual meetings, when Heidi had mentioned the small group piece, I think like we were really playing around with format for the meetings and what would work, because that turn taking is harder and it doesn't have the same engagement. And we finally came up with the idea of making them more interactive. And now we have kids bring something with them. Sometimes it's like a piece of paper and a pencil, marker, pen, something. And we try to almost do like a little mini lesson that can be differentiated a bit, but that can at least get everybody doing something and kind of working together. And then you have like this little buzz of conversation happening in the background. And some will just like hold up work to see and share. Others will stay for a bit and talk about it. But all of a sudden you've got kind of everybody involved in something, and it feels like you've kind of hit that groove. And it's nice to actually have something that mimics maybe the small group stuff, as Paul and I were talking the other day, the stuff that if one of us were to sit down at the creative table and work alongside the kids, we would have done that in a small group, not necessarily in a meeting time. Now our meeting time has kind of mimicked that small group that we would be doing, where we would be working alongside the kids and offering them a little bit of feedback along the way. And it's nice to actually have that, I guess, into place in the midst of these online experiences.
So what's the one thing though that you just decided, yeah, this is never going to work, or you tried it and it's like, because again, as you know, this is not something that any of you or anybody that I know is doing, you know, remote. When you look at online learning, there's lots of, you know, examples at the high school level that people have already done and tap into. This is such a new thing. What's the thing that you just said, okay, I tried that. That's never going to happen. That's not going to work. Forget it.
You know, I don't know. For me, I'm still adjusting to the whole thing. So it's hard to say, and I haven't tried everything yet. So I mean, we had a couple crash and burn things where we tried to do a bump out group that crashed and burned. Like, kids, they're getting better, but you know, there's several crash and burns. I think for me, the big thing is that remote learning has been so far largely about creating content and delivering it versus more inquiry and self-regulation type of development things, which is, and now I understand a lot of the conversations that people would have. Oh, just flip the classroom. And I saw that, and I tried that, you know, many years ago with blogs and different things. And I think Aviva is so strong at how she does that and approaches that. On my end, I struggle with what content delivery means and what that kind of is, and some of the subtleties of the difference between that and what is early childhood education specifically. It's not content delivery. I mean, there is some of that, but what they're really doing is learning how to be a human being, learning how to learn, learning how to read. They need that interaction. And so that is a struggle. I don't think you can ever replace that or even get close to the amount. I mean, if you're just to count the interactions that a child has in a daily regular classroom, is that, you know, it's unmeasurable. You try it for a minute and you're like, holy cow. And in this, the dynamic, you know, social, it's so limited. So, and that I actually fear for children, and what are some of the developmental lags that could occur because of the lack of that sort of, you know, isolation. Mm-hmm. So that is a serious concern. And I mean, it goes into a larger philosophical discussion about what is mastery learning and you know, content versus the actual doing, and what is the education of doing. So that inquiry drive is definitely something I'm pushing for, but then you've got to teach the parent more what that is, and they've got to allow that to happen in spaces, which I also find tricky. So there's a lot of moving blocks that it's going to take. It's a long process that I don't know that you can ever get close to replicating.
For me, what something that I needed to put aside right away is the idea that it has to be perfect. So I realized early on, I can't let perfect be the enemy of good. And my first YouTube video for exercise was okay, but it wasn't perfect. And I think if you're going to do something where you're presenting yourself online or wanting to do something outside of the box, it's really important to be patient with yourself and to be very forgiving with yourself, because the first one's going to be awkward and weird, but it only gets better. And I'm also I had a career as a singer-songwriter, and have taken those tools of creativity into this new venture of making videos. And something that I learned right away is that your creativity is like a tube of toothpaste, and if you've left the cap off for years, that first chunk's going to be really stiff and gross. But you got to push through that before you can get to the good, juicy, flowy stuff. So, you know, if you're going to do something outside the box, do it, and be really patient with the first product that you come up with, and be gentle on yourself, because it might be a little awkward, but it'll only get better and you'll learn as you go. And I had some great feedback from some parents and grandparents who were involved with their child's distance education. Some saying, oh, this dance video was too fast, or they don't really like yoga. And at first I took it to heart a little bit, which you would do as a human being, but then realizing, well, they're really trying to help me out and help me to realize how I could engage their children more. So I was really appreciative of that. And of course, now that parents are even more involved in the child's education, you'll get a lot more comments back, which I've really appreciated, because it's going to help me to make better content for the children. But I relate so much to what Heidi just said about content. That was like such an aha moment to hear you say that. Like, yeah, this is a very content driven thing, and I'm really excited to see the kids one-on-one, because we're really missing that piece.
I think for us and for me, one of the things is, like, we're used to having a lot of provocations, a lot of projects on the go on lots of different topics all at the same time in the classroom. And when we started, we wanted to kind of offer a play-based at-home program, if that's even possible. I'm not sure, but that's what we were attempting to do. And we were finding that there was just too many types of options for parents. And so by offering, like, looking at the interests that we had before the break and trying to offer an at-home option for 5 or 6 of them, it became almost overwhelming, and everything that was coming back to us was not related to any of them. And then we weren't sure, were we missing the boat on the interest, or was it just too much for people to look at? And so what we decided to do was scale back a little bit, look at 2 or 3 different areas, and then use our meeting times as ways to kind of set up that learning. So even though we'd email parents, some photographs, maybe a video, some question prompts, something that would help drive it at home, if we used our meeting times throughout the week to kind of bridge some of those interests, then we found that there was more stuff happening at home, and we were hearing more stuff connected to them. And we could almost like work with the kids to set up the environment instead of looking at having the parents set up the environment. We are trying to not make it all just content driven stuff. I mean, I think one of the things, and I said it a bit in the chat too, is we are lucky in Ontario that our kindergarten program document supports that kind of pedagogy. So we're able to support that as well in a home environment. And we were also lucky because we've shared that pedagogy with parents since the beginning of September. So now when this happened in March, they've become accustomed to it. A lot of them are supporting that kind of learning environment at home already. And so the transition maybe was not as big as it could have been if this was all new learning for them too. They were comfortable in helping to support it because we've been helping to support them in supporting it since September.
What's happening in the chat, Alec? Got anything there that we?
Oh yeah, I think Sharon asked a good question earlier about does anyone have thoughts of what this will look like in September if we were still doing this? Because I think there's been a lot of grace given to our transition here, and a lot of forgiveness, and perhaps that's not going to be as a parent, or as there may not be as much grace because we have to kind of get back to business. Best case scenario, we'll be back in schools and things will be normal, but that's probably not going to happen. So I'm wondering, if we can attend to that particular question from Sharon.
Well, and we already know, like, Quebec is trying to get back, and one of the things, they've got a lot of restrictions around, especially starting with the younger kids, about that. So that could be part of this question too, is like dealing with those potential challenges.
Even kindergarten kids coming in, she alludes to it there, like, who have never seen each other face to face, like they've never had that chance. What does that look like? So anyone want to take up that's a tough question, but a very, very important one.
Well, Teacher Tom just wrote something on that recently, and the idea of inflicting trauma, we have to be I think super careful with the little kids. I think it's a completely different, you can tell even a 13-year-old, they can understand that. Even 7 can understand that, but it is painful for young children. 7, it is painful. The kids are they are upset and suffering. And I think we cannot, pretend, oh, well, they'll be used to it by then. It is against nature to not touch. I mean, it is a sense. It's like, okay, go through life now without your eyes. Let's all become blind. Okay, well, there's going to be some trauma. I mean, so I think that is the top consideration that policymakers need to have, is that, coming back without being able to hug each other, to put a hand on a shoulder, to be together, play, ring around the rosy, whatever it is, and hold hands, make a circle. If you can't do that, then we can't be back, I think. If you can't hold hands, make a circle, Jennifer, this is, basic gym. I mean, that is the most quintessential early childhood thing there is. And if you can't do that, I would argue that it's not the right time to come back for little kids. It's better to keep them at home and keep this sort of format going, although that has its own bit too. And so with a whole new group, I mean, that's the thing. At least we were in March. So we had, all of those months of experience and together. Bringing a new group in, I think that's going to be very difficult. Getting to know a child in the way that we know them now and starting in this space, I think is very difficult. So I'm not sure how we do that. I don't know what other people think.
Yeah, I have no idea. As you're responding, Heidi, I'm panicking like she's going to stop talking soon and it's going to be my turn. I have no idea. So something that our principal has encouraged us to do is to get a bit more comfortable with the camera. And I think just as a way to develop that skill, just in case this gets extended. So that would be my, the only insight that I would have is to just to, if this lasts longer or if it comes back, who knows, just to sort of get used to, this now. So
that's huge.
No, I'm the same way. I don't know what to do. I just know that you're not going to be able to stop 3-year-olds, some of our kids are 3 when they start kindergarten. There's no way you're going to be able to stop them from touching somebody or hugging someone. It's just not going to be possible. Like, they're not developmentally there. They learn through touching. They're tactile. They're like, that's what they look for. And September, of all grades, especially when they're 3, they're going to need the soothing that comes from a hug, a touch, a physical closeness, not 6 feet. I don't know a way around that. And honestly, it's what causes me probably the most anxiety right now, is trying to figure out what that is going to look like. I think if it was online, anything with a face, a video, whatever, I think would probably be, our greatest way of attempting to bridge some kind of relationship, but it's going to be a very different one when you haven't had the face-to-face relationship. Paula and I are pretty lucky right now that we have a lot of kids who have siblings who are going to be starting kindergarten in September. And a lot of those parents have had their siblings join along in our meetings. So, there's no guarantee they'll be in our class, but it is another way to try to form a bit of a relationship with other kids. But it's not going to be the same. And it's kind of scary, but yeah, I don't have any idea.
Well, Christy says that we're professionals. We figured this out so far. We'll keep figuring it out. All that said, we're doing what we can. And I don't know that anybody has said, "Hey, this is good." Like, nobody wants this that we're in to continue in this way. That said, this will be my last question, I think. Of the things that you've done and experienced so far, which of these are the things you said, I'm going to keep doing this, or this is something that, and maybe when I say this, maybe it isn't like I'm going to do this in an online context, but something I've developed or figured that I'm going to, that strategy, that idea, that whatever, I'm going to keep doing. So I think I want to start with Jennifer on that, because Jennifer, you know, I look at your YouTube channel and look, you haven't been doing these videos. This was not part of your repertoire before this. So let me start with you on this question. And maybe it's this, but maybe there's other things that you said, I'm going to keep doing this in some way or not. So is there something you're going to keep doing moving forward, Jennifer?
Absolutely. So I'm very passionate about creativity, but I often forget to solicit that from my students. And the odd time, you know, before the lockdown, the odd time, you know, the student would say, hey, can we play this game? Or I have an idea for this game. And I'd always wanted to make it a point of trying to get them to invent their own game, whatever that would be. And then making space and time for that. And as I mentioned earlier, when I started soliciting dance moves and that kind of participation from the students, the participation went up exponentially. So I really want to keep doing that, of getting the kids to tell me what they want to see, what they like, and their ideas, because, you know, we can get so used to what we're doing that when we stop and make space and time to listen to their ideas, they're amazing. I mean, kids are born artists, you know, like we've all heard that quote from Picasso, you know, the trick is to maintain your artistship as you continue on through life. And they've got incredible ideas, and their dance moves are so very avant-garde, you know, so I'm excited to see what else they'll come up with. So I'm going to keep soliciting their ideas for activities we can do together.
Aviva, Heidi, what are you going to do? Keep doing.
Go for it, Heidi, if you've got
Oh, you know, again, I'm not sure. There's certain things I like. You know, I'm not a huge lesson planner in the way of, okay, on Monday I'm going to do this. I sort of have a more general template and I know where I'm going. And this requires me to be, okay, Sunday night, it's all done. All the videos are in and I don't have to think about it. And there is a certain freedom that comes from that, that isn't bad. So maybe some of that, I mean, that also takes away, if some kid comes up with an idea and you want to go, you can always go there. So I tend to be a little more on my feet. And so maybe that, I don't know. It's hard to know.
That's fair. That's fair. And you know, that's the other thing too, is like, I want to be cognizant when I speak with people about this. You know, there's always conversations about silver linings. I like those, I'm interested in, but I also want to acknowledge for some people they're saying like, there's no silver lining. I don't want to do any of this again. And I think that's a fair response. So I think you need to honor people. At the same time, you know, if those people are learning something and gleaning ideas, that's fine too. So Aviva, where you got anything that you think, I like this and I might keep doing this, or?
Well, it's fun. I've been thinking about this question a lot, and I actually asked my teaching partner Paula about this one, and we bounced it back and forth a bit this morning as well, because, you know, at first, when I've seen this, I've seen a lot of people talk about independence, and independence is really big with us and trying to promote independence with kids, but that's something that we've always done. And I feel like the piece that's maybe missing is that independence around the technology. But I struggle a little bit because I don't know that having young kids on technology for a large portion of the time is the right move either. And so I think maybe one thing that we might look at is a piece of technology like, say, Flipgrid, where we could, you know, help build some independence in kids in using that tool, have them able to maybe sign in using their board account, which would build a little more independence if something like this were to happen again, but also allow for an extension on some thinking skills and independence for kids that are ready and for kids where this would be, you know, the best possible option. Is it going to be for everybody? Probably not, but maybe there's a point in looking at the independence around some tools that we might not have considered before, but might help maybe bridge that gap a little bit if something were to happen again, and a tool that would allow them to show some independent thinking and stuff, and maybe have that portfolio aspect, which is something that I've always wanted but just haven't had before. So
Aviva, you sparked something in your answer, and that was the portfolio. Is, if anything, it's super nice having all the stuff right there. Like, oh, I have that video, I have that photo, I have all that stuff. And when you're in the classroom, there's so much that, you know, you're like, yes, I'm going to get to those digital portfolios. Yes, I'm never have gotten to digital portfolios.
yes.
This year, it's easy to get to digital. They will have them. I mean, there will be pain involved, but in putting that together, but you know, it's there. And so it's just going to be me sitting there, you know, doing the thing. But so that would be a nice outcome. That's going to be a nice gift to give them at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I think the one thing that, you know, and I think Heidi, you kind of mentioned it, or maybe it was Aviva talked about at the beginning, around how important it was. They just want to see you, like they just. And I noticed somebody, and I don't remember, it was early on in the chat, somebody had mentioned that their district actually said they didn't want any videos posted of teachers, and I just, and you know, I understand where people are coming from with that. At the same time, especially that's something that a 5-year-old doesn't understand. Why can't I see my teacher? And the fact that they can just see you. I remember a colleague of mine in Ontario a few weeks ago was talking about the first time that his first grade or second grade daughter had their first video conference with their whole class, and the thing was over, and she cried. Like, this was like, those are my friends. I miss my friends. I want, you know, like, that's all this was about. And you know, the content delivery is way down the line of the priority at this time. And so I just want to, Alec, get anything else you wanted to add or put in there before we sort of put a bow on this one? Muted.
Well, what I'm really impressed by is, and I'm happy about, sometimes you get, you know, PD experts that will kind of speak to all teachers, but this conversation really reminded me how important it is to hear how early childhood educators talk about early childhood, you know, the needs of young kids. And so I'm really happy that we had this session, because really it comes down to, you know, like some of the points you just forget as someone who teaches older adults or high school kids or so on. So I'm so happy for the expertise I'm so glad that we invited you to speak to this, because no one else is going to apply the same level of knowledge to these questions and the insight and the uncertainty even about going into September or August. It's going to be tough, but you know, what do we compare it to? 100 years ago? Like, do we just think about, like, this is unprecedented? And I like the comment in the chat around the professionality. Like, we'll figure this out. It's not going to be perfect, but as long as we do apply early childhood principles to these types of problems, and as long as we remember the importance of touch and feeling and presence and all the sensational aspects of early childhood, we're going to do okay. So I think this was really a really impressive conversation, and so I'm glad we had it. So I'll pass it back to Dean. Thank you, all three panelists.
Yeah, and just again to kind of reiterate the fact that, you know, I think one of the characteristics that so many great early childhood educators have is not just empathy, but their own vulnerability. Like, and all of you sort of touched on the fact that you know, wasn't great. There's a lot of stuff, you missteps and a lot of things you did that weren't, but that's, you know, that's what it's like to be a young child. It's like to be a human being, but young children more expose their own vulnerabilities around this and their uncertainties. So being able to, you know, model that, I guess, in some ways, but also, you know, have that sort of care around, we'll do this together, but I get it. You're scared. I get it. You don't, this is challenging. I don't know where to click. I don't know what's going on. And then I think there's a whole piece that we didn't get into so much today, was around the parenting support that they have, because they're, you know, they're a lot more closer to this than perhaps parents of middle schools and high school kids. But anyway, just want to thank everybody, the attendees for coming and participating with your questions and your comments. And even though we didn't necessarily get to them, I was reading them and knowing that a lot of them were even our panelists here were chiming in with the people online as well. So thanks everybody for coming. We'll record it and we'll post it and you can share it with whomever. So thank you ladies, and thanks Alec and all who attended. Cheers.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet everyone.
Good cheer.